It was early in the morning, the kind of crisp, quiet moment before the chaos of the day set in. But for Sarah, everything felt off. The air was thick with uncertainty, and it wasn't just the fever ravaging her body. It was the call she'd just received. "I'm so sorry." Sarah's voice cracked barely a whisper as she clutched her phone. Her fever was high, and her chest felt tight, every breath coming in short gasps. "I'm in the hospital right now. I want to be there, I've prepared, but—" The voice on the other end was cold, unyielding. "We don't reschedule interviews. If you're not here on time, your application is disqualified." The words stung as they echoed in her ears. There was no sympathy, no understanding. Just a final "thank you" before the line went dead. Sarah's heart sank. The weight of her exhaustion and the crushing realization hit her at once. She let her arm fall to the side, feeling like all her energy had been drained away. The hospital room felt so sterile, so quiet as she stared at the white ceiling above her. The pale morning light filtered through the blinds, and for a moment, it wasn't the fever that blurred her vision. It was the despair creeping in. Her gaze slowly drifted to her worn leather bag tightly clutched against her side. This bag was more than just an accessory. It was her lifeline. She pulled it closer, opened it with trembling hands, and inside, nestled safely, was the one thing she had left to hold on to: her resume. The resume she had meticulously typed up the night before, the resume that could change everything. And resting gently on top of it was a tiny handwritten note, the kind she had written for herself, reminding her why she was doing this. It read, "This is the start of something better." Her breath hitched as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, barely audible, "don't take this chance away from me. My daughter needs this. She deserves more." In the corner of the room, a small figure sat quietly watching her mother. Lily, only 4 years old, with honey-colored hair and eyes as blue as the sky, had seen it all. She had watched her mother make countless sacrifices, working late shifts at the diner, coming home tired, but still finding the strength to sing lullabies to her before bed. She had witnessed Sarah fix their broken toaster with nothing more than duct tape and a spoon, watched her skip meals so Lily could eat, and now she saw her mother in tears. But Lily didn't speak. Instead, she sat there, her small hands clenched on her lap, her face serious beyond her years. When Sarah finally succumbed to the medication, drifting off into a restless sleep, Lily didn't move. She stayed silent, her little legs swinging from the plastic chair. Then quietly, she stood up. She approached her mother, brushing a damp strand of hair from Sarah's forehead, a soft gesture of care. Lily turned and quietly unzipped her mother's bag. Inside was the resume, the one that Sarah had looked at every night for a week, and with a determined little hand, Lily took it. She looked at it for a long moment, then without a sound, she walked over to the coat rack. She reached for her favorite pink dress, the one with the little white bows on the sleeves, and slipped it on. It was a dress she loved, a dress that made her feel important, like she was ready for something big. And with the oversized folder clutched tightly against her chest, she padded quietly out of the room, tiptoeing down the hallway. The hospital was busy, full of nurses, patients, and doctors rushing past. But no one noticed the little girl walking alone, determination in every step. She was small, barely visible to most, but to her there was only one thing that mattered: getting to the place her mother had dreamed of. She crossed the streets confident and fearless, as if she knew exactly where she was going. She took the right bus as if by magic, remembering the number her mother had mentioned so many times. For Lily, this was a mission. She held her mother's resume tight to her chest, like it was a precious secret that could change everything. 40 minutes later, Lily stood in front of a towering glass building, the kind you see in movies. The letters on the front read, "Braden & Co. Global Solutions." She had seen this building before in the brochure her mother had pinned to their fridge. With a deep breath, Lily walked through the front doors. The lobby at Braden & Co. was bustling, the usual morning rhythm filling the space. The clicking of footsteps against the marble floor, the quiet buzz of conversations, and the hum of elevator doors opening and closing. Charlotte, the receptionist, was flipping through her schedule when she noticed the small shadow that appeared across the marble floor. She looked up, blinking in surprise. There stood Lily, no taller than the counter itself, wearing her pink dress with white bows, white socks bunched up above her shoes, and a tiny red clip holding back her honey-colored hair. Her blue eyes were wide and curious, but most of all she looked serious, like she had a purpose. "Sweetheart," Charlotte said slowly, leaning over the counter, unsure of what she was seeing. "Are you looking for someone?" Lily nodded, clutching the oversized folder even tighter. "I'm here for the job interview," she said simply. Charlotte blinked, stunned. "Interview?" "Yes," Lily replied, lifting the folder higher. "It's my mom's. She's really good, but she's sick today, so I came instead." Charlotte's mouth fell open and she quickly scanned her list for the morning's interviews. Sure enough, there it was, Sarah Parker, scheduled for 9:00. Lily, the last candidate of the morning. Charlotte paused, unsure of what to do next. Okay," she finally said, a little shaken. "One moment, Lily." She pressed her earpiece. "Lena, could you inform Mr. Braden that he needs to come down? It's about the last interview. Just tell him it's important." Upstairs in the sleek, glass-walled executive office, Albert Braden, the CEO of Braden & Co., sat at his desk. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless in business, and emotionally unavailable. He had built his company from the ground up and dismissed most interview days as nothing more than routine disappointments. But today was different. When Lena, his assistant, entered the room, a flicker of a smile tugged at her lips. "Albert," she said, "you may want to take this one in person." He raised an eyebrow. "Is it the Harvard grad or the ex-Google manager?" "Neither," she replied. "It's very unique. Just come down." Albert sighed, adjusted his watch, and made his way downstairs. He had no idea just how much his day was about to change. Albert stepped off the elevator expecting the usual routine. Another interview, another round of resumes, another half-hour of questions that led nowhere. But what greeted him in the lobby was something he had never expected. There, standing in the middle of the polished marble floor, was Lily, the little girl who had walked in like she owned the place. She wasn't fazed by the hustle around her employees, rushing past the soft murmur of conversations and the hum of the elevators. No, Lily stood there, her small figure, unwavering eyes bright and full of purpose. Albert blinked, taken aback by the sight of her, standing alone in the bustling office lobby. "Lily," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and curiosity. The moment she saw him, her face lit up. "You're the boss?" she asked cheerfully, as if she had just walked into a friend's house. Albert paused for a moment, caught off guard. "Yes, I am," he replied. Lily's response was even more unexpected. "I'm here to show you my mum's paper," she said, walking right up to him, the oversized folder held firmly in both hands. "She's sick, but she really wants this job, and I think she deserves it." Albert looked down at the folder. The edges were a little bent, and there were a few smudges on the paper, but it was clear she had brought it with the utmost care. He took it from her hands, his gaze still on the little girl, trying to make sense of the situation. The lobby had gone quiet. Dozens of employees had stopped in their tracks, watching the scene unfold in stunned silence. Albert turned to Charlotte, the receptionist, who had followed him out of the elevator. She was looking at him with wide eyes, unsure of what to make of this. "Charlotte," Albert said slowly, "clear my schedule for the next 15 minutes." Charlotte blinked, clearly confused. "Sir, I'm conducting an interview," she said, her voice cautious. Albert turned back to Lily, who was looking up at him, waiting. He took a deep breath. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing toward the hallway. Lily beamed and nodded. The walk to the conference room was short, but it felt surreal. Lily marched ahead of Albert, confidently holding the folder, not a hint of hesitation in her steps. She knew exactly what she was doing. Albert, on the other hand, had no idea where this would lead. But something about the sheer audacity of a little girl walking into his office with a resume in hand left him feeling like he couldn't simply brush this off. They reached the conference room and Albert opened the door for her, pulling out a chair that was twice her size. But Lily climbed up without any trouble, her small feet dangling just above the floor. Albert sat down across from her and opened the folder, scanning the resume as he glanced up at her every so often. "So, Lily," he asked, adjusting his tone to sound a bit more conversational, "tell me why your mom wants to work here." Lily leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the edge of the table. Her voice was clear, honest, and unpolished. "Mama works really hard," she said, looking up at Albert with all the seriousness of a grown-up. "She doesn't buy anything for herself. She always saves money for me. She wants a job that's not just cleaning or waiting tables. She says she wants to use her brain again." Albert couldn't help but blink, taken aback by the simple truth in her words. He glanced back at the resume, but something about Lily's directness caught his attention more than the words on the paper. "She went to college," Lily added. "But she had to stop. Because she had me." Albert nodded his mind, turning over her words. A woman who had sacrificed so much for her child, who had dreams that were put on hold only to fight for a better future for them both. It was a story that resonated deeply, far beyond the formalities of a resume. "And do you think she would do well here?" Albert asked, his voice softer now. Lily nodded enthusiastically, her eyes sparkling with confidence. "She's really smart and kind. She always helps people." Albert looked down at the resume again, reading each line with a new level of interest. The list of part-time jobs, waitress, housekeeper, delivery driver, wasn't the kind of experience you'd expect from someone seeking a corporate job. But then there was a small handwritten note at the bottom, written in soft ink. "I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm only asking for a real chance." Albert paused. The words struck him more than anything else in the resume. He had seen countless applications perfectly polished, full of impressive degrees and high-paying job titles, but none had felt as raw, as real as Sarah's did. "And why did you come here today?" Lily Albert asked, his voice low, almost in awe. Lily smiled, her eyes bright with determination. "Because Mama was really sad when she hung up the phone," she said, her voice softening. "She said she wanted to give me a better life, so I came to help." Albert leaned back in his chair, a weight pressing down on his chest. This little girl, so young yet carrying the weight of her mother's dreams on her tiny shoulders. It was more than he had ever expected from an interview. More than he had ever expected from anyone. He closed the folder slowly, his mind spinning with the raw honesty of the moment. "Well then," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, "let us begin the interview." Albert sat across from Lily, his hands loosely clasped over Sarah's resume, but his eyes were on the little girl. She sat confidently across from him, her small feet dangling from the oversized chair, her posture straight as a soldier on duty. He had conducted countless interviews over the years, but none had felt like this. None had stirred something inside him quite like this. "Can you tell me what your mom is like?" Albert asked, his voice unusually gentle. Lily didn't hesitate. She blinked thoughtfully, then answered with the certainty of a child who knew her mother better than anyone else in the world. "Mama works all day." All the time, Albert tilted his head slightly, his curiosity piqued. Lily nodded. "She cleans houses, and sometimes she's a waitress. Sometimes she brings food to people's doors. She never gets to sit down much." Albert's frown deepened as he listened. The kind of work Lily was describing was the kind no one talked about, the kind no one bragged about. Yet it was the backbone of so many lives. Sarah wasn't just a mother working to make ends meet. She was a woman who was willing to do anything for her child, no matter how grueling, no matter how thankless. "She never buys anything for herself," Lily added, her voice softening. "Even when her shoes have holes, she says, 'No, these are still good.' And then she buys me new ones instead." Albert glanced down at Lily's shoes, white sneakers with glittery stars. They were new, clean, obviously well cared for. His gaze shifted back to Sarah's resume, which now seemed to tell an entirely different story, one that was far more powerful than any degree or title could represent. "It made sense now," Lily continued, her voice quiet. "She always puts me first." Albert didn't speak. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, taking in the weight of her words. This little girl had seen it all, the sacrifice, the love, the quiet strength that came with being a mother in a world that didn't always offer second chances. "What else does she do, Lily?" he asked, his voice soft, almost reverent. Lily's eyes brightened as she continued. "She never gets mad. Sometimes she's tired, but she always smiles when I give her a picture I drew or when we watch cartoons together." Albert's heart softened at the image of Sarah coming home after a long day, exhausted, but still finding the strength to smile at her daughter's drawings. There was a purity to it, a simple love that didn't need anything more than a moment together to feel complete. "Did your mom go to college?" Albert asked, gently curious about Sarah's background. Lily nodded. "She did. She says she loved learning, but she didn't get to finish. She had me." Albert blinked, his chest tightening as the story unfolded. A woman who had so much promise, so much potential, yet life had thrown a curveball at her. And instead of running from it, she had chosen to stay and give everything she had to her daughter. He paused before speaking again. "And you think she would do well here?" Lily's eyes lit up. "She's really smart and kind. She always helps people. She can do anything." Albert's gaze returned to the resume, his fingers lightly tracing the lines of her work experience. There it was again, those jobs no one ever talked about. No one ever proudly displayed waitress or housekeeper on a resume. But Sarah had put in the work. She had fought for her daughter, for a better life, even when it meant swallowing her own dreams and ambitions. He looked up at Lily, whose wide blue eyes were locked on his, filled with hope and belief. "And why did you come here today?" "Lily." Lily smiled again, a sweet, innocent smile. "Because Mama was really sad when she hung up the phone. She wanted to give me a better life, so I came to help." Albert's heart sank. The innocence in Lily's voice, the way she believed so completely in her mother, made something inside Albert shift. He had seen countless applications over the years, people with degrees, resumes full of accomplishments, but none of them had ever come with the raw, unspoken truth that Sarah's did. None of them had ever been delivered by a little girl with a resume that was half her size, who walked into his office without fear, without hesitation. He sat back in his chair, his eyes softening. "Lily," said, his voice quieter now, "you've done something really brave, coming here today. Showing up for your mom. I think your mom would be proud of you." Lily beamed at him, her face lighting up with the purest joy. "Do you think so?" "I do," Albert replied, giving her a genuine smile. For a moment, the room was quiet, as if everyone had stopped breathing, caught up in the magic of the moment. Albert looked at the resume again this time, with a new understanding. Sarah Parker's story wasn't just about what was on paper. It was about the sacrifices she had made, the love she had given, and the unwavering determination to build a better life for her child. Albert placed the folder down gently on the table, his mind made up. "Well then, let's begin the interview." Albert sat across from Lily, the conference room filled with an almost reverent quiet. The usual corporate buzz seemed to fade away, replaced by the stillness of something far more profound. There, in front of him, was a little girl who had shown up to a job interview in place of her sick mother. A mother who had done everything she could to make sure her daughter never felt the weight of the sacrifices she had made. And yet here they were sitting together in this office, in this moment. Albert took a deep breath and focused on Lily. He could feel the weight of the situation settling in. This wasn't just a simple interview anymore. There was something bigger at play here, something that couldn't be measured by resumes or interview questions. This was about resilience. This was about hope. And it was about the kind of quiet strength that had led Sarah Parker to this moment. So Lily, Albert began, his voice soft but steady. "Tell me, what does your mom want most?" Lily shifted in her seat, her small hands resting on the table, fingers curled lightly. "She wants to be happy," she said, her voice quiet but full of conviction. "She's always tired, but she smiles when I draw her pictures or when we watch cartoons. I think she just needs a break." Albert leaned in slightly, his brow furrowing. "And what kind of job does she want?" Lily's eyes brightened as she spoke, as if she had been waiting for someone to ask her this very question. "She wants a job that lets her buy ice cream every weekend." Albert froze. The simplicity of her answer hit him hard. For all the sacrifices Sarah had made, for all the dreams she had put on hold, she just wanted something so small or so simple. Ice cream. Not a mansion or a designer handbag, not a high-paying job in a corner office. Just the chance to give her daughter a little joy, something to look forward to on a Saturday afternoon. Lily, sensing Albert's pause, tilted her head slightly, her eyes wide with concern. "Do you think she can do it?" she asked, her voice soft. Albert didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the resume and set it aside. He looked at Lily for a long moment, his mind racing. Here was a little girl who didn't know the complexities of the corporate world. She didn't understand the jargon, the networking, or the politics that could make or break a career. But she understood something far more important, the kind of love and sacrifice that could change the course of someone's life. Albert leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Lily. "You know, I've interviewed a lot of people in this room, and not one of them has ever said something that mattered quite like that." Lily's face lit up, her smile wide and hopeful. Really, Albert smiled the smallest of smiles, but one that was real. "Really?" He stood up from the table, moving to the door of the conference room. "Come on, let's go find your mom." Lily's eyes widened, and she jumped off her chair, rushing toward him. She clutched his hand as they walked down the hallway, her small feet pattering against the polished floor. Albert felt a strange sense of pride well up inside him, despite the fact that he wasn't sure what he was even doing. All he knew was that something in him had shifted. Something had broken through the walls he had carefully built around himself, and it was a feeling he couldn't ignore. They reached the elevator, and Albert pressed the button to go up. As the doors closed, he looked down at Lily, who was still holding his hand, her eyes wide with excitement. "You're very brave, you know that," he said quietly. Lily looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "Mama says I'm brave all the time." Albert smiled. For the first time in years, he found himself truly believing in something beyond logic, beyond spreadsheets and financial forecasts. Maybe there was more to life than numbers and profit margins. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into the lobby. Charlotte, the receptionist, looked up from her desk, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Albert with Lily in tow. "Mr. Braden," Charlotte asked, clearly puzzled. "Clear my schedule for the next hour," Albert said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm taking the rest of the day off." Charlotte blinked, but nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." Albert turned back to Lily, who was practically skipping beside him, as if she knew they were about to make something incredible happen. "Shall we go find your mom?" he asked. Lily's face lit up. "Yes." They walked together toward the hospital, the air filled with a strange sense of anticipation. Albert couldn't help but feel that the decision he was about to make would change not just Sarah's life, but his as well. The cab ride to the hospital was brief, but for Albert, every second felt like it was stretching into eternity. His mind kept replaying the conversation he'd had with Lily. The rawness of it, the simplicity of her answers, and the depth of her belief in her mother was something Albert wasn't used to. In the business world, everything was about numbers, logic, and strategy. But this was different. This was about people. This was about hope. As the cab pulled up to the hospital entrance, Albert looked over at Lily, whose excitement had not wavered. She was still holding onto his hand tightly, her little fingers wrapped around his much larger ones with complete trust. Are you excited to see your mom? Albert asked, his voice warm. Lily nodded eagerly. Mama's gonna be so happy, she said, her eyes shining. I think she'll be so proud of me. Albert smiled softly. He wasn't sure what would happen when they walked into that hospital room, but he knew one thing for certain: whatever it was, it would change everything. They entered the hospital and took the elevator up to the floor where Sarah was staying. The hospital corridors were quiet, but Albert could hear the faint beeping of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' feet. When they reached Sarah's room, Albert paused for a moment. He glanced down at Lily, whose face was full of hope. You ready? Albert asked. Lily nodded, her eyes filled with determination. Yes. Albert gently knocked on the door before pushing it open. Inside, Sarah lay on the bed, her body still weak from the fever. She was sitting up slightly, a hand resting on her lap. The moment she saw them, her face shifted. Confusion and exhaustion gave way to surprise, and then something else. Something far more complicated flickered across her face. Albert, she asked, her voice soft and still strained. What are you doing here? Albert stepped into the room and Lily immediately ran to her mother, holding up the oversized folder with both hands. Mama, she said, her voice bright and full of pride. I brought your paper. I came to your interview for you because you were sick. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at her daughter, then back at Albert, who was standing in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with a look of quiet admiration. I don't understand, Sarah whispered, her hand shaking slightly as she reached for Lily. Lily, you didn't. How did you? Albert walked over, gently placing his hand on Sarah's shoulder. She came here with your resume, he said simply, his voice kind but firm. And I listened. I've been thinking about it all day. You're exactly the kind of person we need at Braden & Co. Sarah's breath hitched as she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and awe. You mean it? Albert nodded, his eyes softening. Yes, you have the job. If you're ready. Sarah shook her head, the tears she had been holding back finally breaking free. But I don't know what to say. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. What Lily has been through. Albert took a step back, allowing Sarah and Lily a moment of privacy. I do know one thing, though, he said, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. I know courage when I see it. And your daughter, she's the bravest person I've ever met. Lily, who had been hugging her mother, looked up at Albert with a big smile. See, Mama, I told you. Sarah's tears flowed freely now, but there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I don't know what to say, she murmured, shaking her head again. Albert placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to say anything, he said gently, but if you're willing, we'd love to have you on the team. The room was still for a moment, as if the weight of the decision had settled in the air around them. Then Sarah wiped her eyes and smiled through her tears. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Thank you so much. Albert nodded, turning to leave. We'll give you some time to rest, but when you're ready, we'll be here. As he walked toward the door, he turned back to look at Sarah and Lily. There was something in the room now, something different. It wasn't just about a job offer or a resume. It was about the bond that had been forged in this moment, about the kindness and humanity that had opened a door for a woman who had fought so hard for her family. The following afternoon, Sarah stood in front of the Braden & Co., building a place that just a day ago had felt like a distant dream. She had never expected to be here, never imagined she would walk through these glass doors as anything more than just another hopeful applicant. But now she was about to start her first day, not just with a job, but with a new sense of purpose, with a sense of belonging. She hadn't told Lily what had happened after they left the hospital. She didn't need to. Lily already knew. She could see the way her mother's eyes had lit up when she received the call from Albert's assistant telling her the good news. The world felt different now. Sarah adjusted her navy blouse, smoothing the fabric down as she tried to steady her nerves. Her hand clutched her bag tightly, and her heart raced as she stepped into the building. The receptionist, Charlotte, greeted her like an old friend. "Miss Parker, welcome back," she said warmly, motioning toward the elevator. "Mr. Braden is expecting you." Sarah could hardly believe it. She had been here less than 24 hours ago, a nervous, exhausted woman just hoping for a chance. And now she was walking into this world of glass walls, shiny floors, and high expectations, not just as an outsider, but as someone who had earned a place. The elevator ride was a blur. She barely noticed the quiet chime as it ascended to the top floor. Her mind was racing with questions and doubts. Was she really ready for this? Could she actually do the work? Could she prove herself here, in a place so different from anything she had ever known? But when the elevator doors opened, all those doubts faded into the background. Albert was waiting for her just inside his office. His usually pristine suit was now accompanied by a small, genuine smile, a smile that wasn't part of the usual CEO facade. He stepped forward, offering her a hand. "I'm glad you're here, Sarah," he said, his voice low and steady. "Let's get you settled in." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She didn't have words. All she had was gratitude, immense, overwhelming gratitude for the chance that had come her way thanks to Lily's courage and love. She was ready to take this opportunity, ready to prove to herself and to Lily that she could do this. As she sat down at her new desk later that day, surrounded by the hum of the office, Sarah felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just a job. This wasn't just a paycheck. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a chapter she would write with the same resilience and strength she had shown for years, but now with a sense of support, a sense of community that she had never known before. She remembered the first day Lily had come into the office, clutching her mother's resume like it was the most precious thing in the world. And she realized, sitting in her new office, that Lily had given her far more than just a piece of paper that day. She had given her a new beginning. Weeks passed, and Sarah's confidence grew. She was no longer just an assistant. She became a project team lead, guiding meetings, offering advice, and contributing ideas that were met with respect. Albert's quiet support was always there. He didn't hover, but he noticed everything: how hard she worked, how much she cared, and how she never gave up, no matter how difficult the task. She wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Lily. Every Friday afternoon after preschool, Lily would come to the office, skipping down the hall with her little shoes clicking against the floor. She had a chair in the break room, now her own space, and she had made plenty of friends. The senior staff even called her the real CEO, and Albert always made sure to save her a cookie at company picnics. Lily's presence in the office was a reminder of why Sarah had fought so hard of the love that had brought her here. And sometimes, when Sarah found herself overwhelmed by a meeting or a project, she'd catch a glimpse of Lily sitting in the corner of the office, coloring happily in her sketch pad, and everything seemed a little easier. It wasn't just about work. It was about family, and it was about the unexpected moments that change everything. The moments when a little girl in a pink dress walked into an office with nothing but love, courage, and a mother's dream, and changed the course of two lives forever. One year later, the annual Christmas gala was in full swing. The ballroom glowed with soft gold and forest green lights, fairy lights, hanging above velvet-covered tables. Music played in the background, and laughter echoed around the room as champagne flowed freely. Sarah stood by the grand tree in a deep blue gown glowing with quiet grace. Her blonde hair shimmered under the lights, and her smile was calm and assured. Her life in that moment felt exactly the way she had always wanted it to feel, not perfect, but full of promise. Lily twirled nearby in a white dress, silver shoes flashing beneath her as she laughed and danced with the other children. Albert, dressed in black tie, stood a few feet away, his smile warm and open as he watched them both. It wasn't just a CEO admiring his staff. It was a man who had come to care for them both deeply. Albert cleared his throat and tapped his glass, signaling for attention. I know this is the time of year when we usually talk numbers, growth and goals, he said, his voice carrying over the room. But tonight I want to talk about something that changed my life. He paused, his eyes moving towards Sarah and Lily standing together by the tree. A year ago, Albert continued, his voice softening. I received the most unexpected job application I've ever seen. It was hand-delivered by someone about 3 feet tall, wearing a pink dress, holding a resume twice her size. Laughter bubbled around the room as Sarah covered her face in embarrassment. Albert smiled, his eyes misty now. That little girl walked into my office with no fear. And in that moment, she brought more than a resume. She brought hope, courage, and the beginning of something I never knew I needed. He stepped towards Sarah and Lily, gently pulling them close. To both of you, he said softly. Thank you for showing up, for holding on, and for walking into my life exactly when I needed you. The room erupted into applause as glasses clinked and the music swelled. Albert pulled Sarah and Lily in, close, a rare, genuine smile crossing his face. In that moment, Sarah understood. Family wasn't just about where we came from. It was about who we chose to walk beside us when life got hard. Sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places, like a boardroom, a hospital room, or the heart of a child. And sometimes one brave little girl in a pink dress can change everything.